Good morning, everybody. My name's Declan Tannum. I'm the principal of Arranmore Catholic College, and I'd like to welcome you here to our campus today. It's great to see so many young, positive faces. I often say that education is a ministry of hope, and it always fills me with hope to see young people like yourselves gathered for such an event. I would like to also introduce to you our Archbishop, the Reverend Timothy Costello, and we also have here this morning in the table down the back corner Bishop Don Sproxton, and next to him we have Father Angelo, who is our parish priest, and working our way around the table from the Catholic Education Office we have Diana Altieri and Deborah Sace, and Dr. Timothy MacDonald, who is the Executive Director of the Catholic Education Office. He's the boss, in other words. He's my boss anyway. So I'd like to welcome you here for the LifeLink launch today, and I'll hand over to Archbishop Costello. Thank you.
Thanks, Declan, very much. Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for being here with us this morning for our official launch of LifeLink Day 2015. I was just chatting to some of the students from Irene McCormack College. It doesn't seem like a whole 12 months ago that we were doing this out at Irene McCormack College, and now here we are at Arranmore. And I'm really pleased to be here, and I know Bishop Don is also very pleased to be here, and we're looking forward to a morning of sharing some things with you, but also hopefully, especially after morning tea, engaging with you, hearing some of the concerns that you might have, some of the questions you might like to throw at us, but that will come after morning tea. First of all, I want to share a few things with you about what we're here for this morning. I've just got to find my notes and make sure I stick to the script, otherwise Mr. Mendez is going to be very cross with me. So I've expressed my words of welcome. He's sitting down the back there smiling at me. And now I have to tell you that what we're doing here this morning is being filmed. So you'll all be on camera, so make sure you smile. It's being filmed so that everybody at your school, and also those schools who for whatever reason weren't able to be a part of what we're doing here this morning, can share in this launch of LifeLink Day. So in a sense, you're representing the whole of Catholic education throughout our Archdiocese of Perth. So once again, I'm really grateful to you for being here with us. Mr. Tannum has already welcomed our special guests, Bishop Sproxton, Father Joseph Angelo, Dr. MacDonald, Deborah Sace and Diana Altieri. So I won't repeat that except, of course, to say that you are very welcome. And I particularly wanted to thank Arranmore Catholic College for hosting this event. I was here during the school holidays working with some of the Year 12 students about their Year 12 curriculum in religious education. And again, the college was very hospitable and couldn't do enough for us. So I do want to thank your principal, all the staff and all of the support staff and everyone who's been involved in organising the day. I want to begin just with a very simple prayer. It's the LifeLink prayer that some of you will be familiar with. We usually pray it each time we gather to think about what LifeLink is all about. So let's just pause for a moment. I'd like to remind you of something Jesus once said, that whenever two or more people gather in his name, that he would be with them. And certainly as representatives of Catholic education here in WA, we are gathered in the name of Jesus. So we'll just take a moment to recognise that even though in a sense we can't see him, he is here with us. And then we'll pray this prayer together. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God of mercy and compassion, we praise you for your goodness. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Fill us with the spirit of loving service as we recognise in those we meet the face of Jesus, your Son. Through the generous work of our LifeLink welfare agencies, may burdens be lifted from the shoulders of your people, and may they feel the warmth of your kindness and love. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Our morning begins with what is being called the Archbishop's address. It's really an opportunity for me just to share with you a few thoughts about the theme of LifeLink Day and also about the whole purpose of LifeLink and what it is trying to achieve here in our Archdiocese. And you can see on your screen that the theme of the day is this one, which we've really just prayed about. It's seeing in those we meet the face of Jesus. So I've got a few thoughts that I really wanted to share with you this morning to help us reflect on this idea. This is the key idea, that when we encounter other people, it is possible for us, if we know how to look, to see in them the face of Jesus. Now that's the kind of thing that we often say in the church, and in one sense it sounds like a pretty simple thing, but I think in fact it's a little bit more complicated than it might at first appear to be. So I want to start in what might be a rather strange way to talk about this, because I want to talk about something which in itself is not the main thing I want to say, but is really just a way into the topic. And the thing that I want to talk about is the Shroud of Turin. Some of you will know what I'm talking about when I talk about the Shroud of Turin. Others won't have much idea about it at all. The Shroud of Turin is a long piece of cloth. I think it's about perhaps a little bit longer, 3 metres long or a bit longer. It's about 1 metre in length. It's one long strip of cloth, and it has imprinted on it a very faint image of a dead body. That doesn't sound perhaps very exciting or very appealing, but as we talk about this just for a few minutes, I think you'll understand why I've wanted to talk to you about it. Many people believe that the Shroud of Turin may in fact be the burial cloth of Jesus. That is, that when the dead body of Jesus was taken from the cross, it was laid in this cloth, stretched out on the ground, the body placed on the cloth, and then folded over the top of the body. And the reason why people believe that is that you can see, and I hope you can see it on the screen, it may not be as clear as we would like it to be, but in fact the image is very faint anyway. I hope you can see on the screen that on one side you can see what looks like the face at the top with the body, the arms crossed over the lower chest, and the second image on the other side is the back of the cloth. Now, as I say, some people believe that it's the burial shroud of Jesus. Many other people believe that it's a medieval forgery. And one of the reasons why people believe it's a medieval forgery is that some years ago, a few decades ago, some carbon dating tests were done on this cloth, and it dated the cloth to the Middle Ages. Those who believe it's the Shroud of Jesus argue that the part of the cloth that was taken for testing was actually a part that had been sewn on at one stage in history, because at various times in its history, the cloth has been subjected to all sorts of things, including fire, and you'll see those dark patches running up and down the sides of the cloth. They're actually patches that have been sewn on over parts of the cloth that were damaged during fires. So really the long and the short of it is that nobody will ever be able to prove absolutely whether it's the burial cloth of Jesus or not, but many people certainly believe that it is. And as I say, there's a faint image on the back and front of a dead body. The remarkable thing about this cloth was when it was photographed for the first time after the, if you like, the discovery or the invention of photography, when it was photographed in 1898, the photographic negative seemed to produce a positive image. In other words, the original image on the cloth is like a photographic negative, and when you photograph the negative, you get the positive. And so you'll see the image there with the black background is a little bit clearer, and you can start to see the contours of the body and particularly the contours of the face. People who've studied this cloth would say that close examination of it reveals the image of a man who's been crucified in the manner described in the Gospels, in the story of the passion and death of Jesus. So you see things, if you can get close enough to it and you can get images that are very clear, you'll see things like the marks of nails in the hands and in the feet, bruises and cuts all over the body, which would indicate that this person, whoever it was, whether it was Jesus or not, was whipped before he died. That there are puncture wounds on the forehead, which mean that some sharp kind of crown affair was pushed down on his head. Heavy bruising on one of the shoulders, which would correspond to the carting of a very heavy weight, like a cross. And a significant wound in the side of the body, which would correspond to the story in the Gospels of the soldiers thrusting the lance through the side of Jesus. So if it is a forgery, it's a remarkable forgery because it corresponds so closely to what we read in the Gospels. And while I won't go into any more details about it than this, no one yet has been able to work out how this image could have been produced because there's no sign of paint or pigment of any kind. It's a mystery. And maybe we'll never know anything more about it than that it's a mystery. However, the next slide I'll put up, read the sentence on the bottom carefully because there's one word in there that's very important. This may be, not is, not isn't, but may be the face of Jesus. If it is, it's a remarkable thing that we have what virtually amounts to a photograph of Jesus from 2,000 years ago. Quite a remarkable thing. And of course, people get very passionate about it and do all sorts of investigations. I don't think we'll ever be able to prove it one way or the other, but it's certainly intriguing. You can see there the very faint image is the image on the cloth. The much sharper image is what happens when you photograph the cloth. This is a slightly enhanced version of that second image. And what it seems to remind us of, it certainly reminds us of Jesus, if it isn't in fact the face of Jesus, it reminds us of a man who has been rejected and abused and tortured and murdered. A man of suffering. You just might be interested to know, because if you can get a bit of time off school, if your teachers will let you, you might want to hop on a plane and go over to Turin, because at the moment the shroud is on public display in Turin, a city in northern Italy, to mark the bicentenary of the birth of St. John Bosco. Now, I've never seen the shroud before, but I happen to belong to the religious order founded by St. John Bosco. And the boss of the Salesian order, it's a big order, 16,000 members all around the world. The boss of the Salesian order has asked all the Salesian bishops in the world to meet him in Turin on the 24th of May. There's 120 of us around the world. I really thought it was an invitation I couldn't refuse. So I'm heading off to Turin, and I will be in Turin and will be able to see the shroud. You can see there the way it's displayed in a big cask. And normally it's not made public because they're frightened of the effect that the light will have on the image. But every so often they display it, and it's going to display, well, it is on display now in Turin and will be for the rest of the month. The present Pope, Pope Francis, is actually going to Turin in June to have a look at the shroud, and he recently spoke about it, and this is what he said. And this is really the main point that I wanted to make this morning. Contemplating the shroud, sitting there in front of it, whether you're there in Turin or you get a really good image of it and you put it up on your screen, computer screen at home, and have a look at it, contemplating the shroud, Francis tells us, might help us all to find in Jesus Christ the merciful face of God. Pope Francis isn't saying that the shroud is the burial cloth of Christ. He's simply saying by looking at this image, it's an invitation to see in the face of Jesus the merciful face of God. But then Francis goes on to add something that is very important, and you couldn't have the first idea without the second idea, and that's this one. To recognise the merciful face of God in the faces of our brothers and sisters, especially those who suffer the most. Remember that the image on the shroud is the image of a man of suffering. So we're being invited to see in the shroud the image of our brothers and sisters, especially those who suffer the most. I think Pope Francis is actually grabbing hold of an idea that is really at the heart of what we believe as Christians. And I think if we grasp this idea, then I think we'll really be able to understand what LifeLink Day is all about and why we in the Archdiocese put so much effort into it. Pope Francis, in that little statement that I just read for you, I think is really making three key points. And those three key points are about what it means to be a Christian. First of all, the Pope is reminding us that to be a Christian is to believe in a God who is merciful, a God who is full of mercy. Not a God who's full of anger, not a God who's full of a desire for vengeance, not a God who's full of disappointment and despair at the way people behave, but a God who is full of mercy. That's the kind of God Christians believe in. The second point, and this is really a key for us as Christians, because lots of people who might not be Christians would believe in a God who is merciful. The second point is really the key in our faith, that we believe in Jesus, who in his human history, his human story, his flesh and blood life, with all that goes into it, and his death and his resurrection, unveils for us, reveals for us the real face of God. You might put it this way: if you want to know what God's like and how God thinks and how God feels and how God wants to be, then have a look at Jesus, because we can't see God. But by reading the Gospels and living out our faith, we can come in contact with Jesus, a human person just like us. And in him, you see what God's like. I want you to keep that in mind, because I want to focus in on that in a few moments' time. And then the third thing, and this is the thing that Christians often forget. They focus on point 1 and point 2 and sometimes forget point 3. A Christian is someone who believes that Jesus is waiting to meet us in our brothers and sisters, in all our brothers and sisters. But in a special way, he's waiting to meet us in those who are suffering. That's what we believe. That's at the heart of our faith. That's what it is to be a Christian. That we believe in a God who is full of mercy. That we get to know him by looking at Jesus and getting to know Jesus. And that he is waiting to meet us, to encounter us, to speak to us in our brothers and sisters, and especially in those who suffer in any way. LifeLink Day, which is what we're here about this morning, LifeLink Day is all about responding in a practical, down-to-earth way to people who are suffering. Because if Jesus is there waiting to meet us, if Jesus is there in the man who's sitting on the streets of Perth begging for some money, if Jesus is there in the people who are suffering this terrible disaster in Nepal at the moment, if Jesus is there in anybody who's finding it hard to manage in the present economic climate, if Jesus is there in people who are suffering from, mental illness or extreme poverty, if he's there waiting to meet us and we want to get to know him, that's where we'll meet him. So these are pretty key things for us as Christians. Well, if this Jesus is the one who unveils for us, lets us into the secret, if I could put it that way, of what God is really like, and God is merciful, we might ask ourselves the question, what does mercy look like in Jesus? What does it actually look like in practice? How does Jesus, in what he says and what he does, show what it means to be merciful? Because unless we can think about that question, we'll miss out on two things. The first thing we'll miss out on is what God is really like. And the second thing we'll miss out on is what we're supposed to be like. Because we're disciples of Jesus. We're supposed to be following him. If he's merciful, then we're his followers, we've got to be merciful. If he reaches out to people in need and we're his followers, we've got to reach out to people in need. Or when I say got to, I suppose I really should say we're being asked to. We can always say no. But we're being asked to reach out to people in need. So what does this mercy actually look like in Jesus? I want to reflect briefly, if I've got time, on three stories from the Gospel that I think most of you will be familiar with. I'm not going to read the whole thing for you. I'll just remind you of the bare outlines of the story and hopefully get you to reflect on these things, but ask yourself, well, that's all very well. Jesus told that story 2,000 years ago. He lived on the other side of the world, different time, different place, different culture. How do I translate that into living in Perth, in this part of the world, in 2015? What's it going to look like here? But until we've worked out what it looks like for Jesus, we won't really know what it looks like here if it's supposed to be a living out of our following of Jesus. So that's where I want to go just for a few moments. The first story is one that I'm sure you will all remember very well. It's the story of the prodigal son. You might remember the story and this is a story, remember, Jesus tells. It's not something that happened to Jesus, it's a story he's telling to make a point. And in the story he says, look, there was once this father, and he had two sons, and the father was obviously fairly wealthy, and his younger son, who was a bit of a difficult young man, got fed up with living at home and went to his father and said, I want you to give me my inheritance now. So I'm not going to wait till you're dead, I want it now. And so the father, and this is a very strange thing because the father shouldn't have done this, it was very much against the culture of the time, but nevertheless he did. He divided his property in two. He gave his younger son his share of the property, and off the boy goes to a distant place somewhere else, and he wastes the money, he spends it all, he throws it away, and he ends up basically, we would say, on the streets. And in fact, he finds himself unable to get a job, and the only job he can get is to feed the pigs on a local farm. And no one would give him anything to eat, and so he was forced to eat the same food that he was feeding to the pigs. So his life is in a mess. He made a big mistake, he compounded it by making other big mistakes, ended up on the streets, and then the way that Jesus tells the story, it says he finally came to his senses. It was like a light bulb moment, you know? And he said, what am I doing? Even the servants at home are better off than I am. So he says, I know what I'll do. I'll go home and I'll say to my father, Father, I have sinned against God and against you. I'm not even worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. Now, I don't know in the way the story is told by Jesus whether the younger son was sincere or just really smart. Maybe he'd worked out the best way to tug at his father's heartstrings, who knows? So he sets out and he's practicing his speech as he walks along the road. He's got to make sure he gets it right, because if he doesn't manage to get it right, his father might not take him back. And then in the way the story's told, the father spots him coming down the road, which means, of course, that the father has pretty well put his life on hold and is just sitting there in the front room, staring down the road, hoping against hope that his son will come back. So he spots him coming down the road. There's the boy in the distance. He's practicing his little speech. His father comes out of the house, goes tearing it down the road, and as he gets closer, the boy launches into his speech. "Father, I've sinned against God and against you." But if you read the story carefully, you'll see that he only gets halfway through the speech because his father throws his arms around him, gives him a big hug, takes him back to the house, gives him new clothes, feeds him, gives him everything he needs, and throws a big party. Now, Jesus tells this story because he wants to tell us what God's mercy looks like. So I've got up there on the screen, as far as the Father's concerned, and the Father's meant to be a symbol of God, as far as the Father's concerned, there's no condemnation, there's no demand for reparation, there's no harsh punishment, there's just a warm welcome. Now, as well as all the students here, we've got some of your teachers who, of course, would be parents, and they might be sitting here thinking, well, if my son did this to me, I wouldn't be letting him off scot-free. How's he ever going to learn if I don't make him pay? He's going to be grounded at least for 6 months. I've got to think up some way of getting through to this kid that he's done the wrong thing and he's got to make up for it. But there's none of that in the story. No condemnation. Why did you do this to me? How dare you treat me like that? None of that. No demand for reparation. Well, I'll take you home, but you're going to have to work off all the money you've wasted and pay me back. None of that. No harsh punishments, just a warm welcome. And the point of the story is, this is what God's like. And for us as Christians, the next stage in the reflection is, that means this is what we're supposed to be like when we see people, even when they've made bad mistakes, even when they've messed things up. So the question that I'd want to ask all of us is this: who is the prodigal son today? Well, could well be the person who makes some big mistakes and finds his or her life in a bit of a mess. And you might think of people that you might know or that you've seen on TV or you've come across in some way and ask yourself, have I been inclined to make some judgments about these people? Are we inclined maybe to condemn them? Do we say perhaps, well, they brought it on themselves, it's their own stupid fault. They've deserved what they're getting. Or do we sort of get on our high horse and say, well, at least I'm too smart to do a stupid thing like that? Or can we say, if this were ever to happen to me, if I were to make a bad mistake, even though at the moment I don't intend to, but if I were to make a bad mistake, I would hope that someone will be understanding. Someone will be forgiving. Somebody will be generous. That I won't have my mistakes held against me. And I think that while our first instinct might be to say, well, they brought it on themselves, it's their own stupid fault, thank God I've got a few more brains, I wouldn't do anything like that. I think the better response is the last one. So that's the kind of reflection that I would be inviting you to make. Because the truth is, sometimes some of the people in our society, and we see them wandering around the city, we see them in all sorts of difficult situations, we see them lonely or hungry or homeless. Sometimes it's true, they have made some bad choices. Sometimes they've just had really bad luck. But what the story of the prodigal son is telling us, I think, is that when someone's in that situation, what he or she needs isn't anger, it's not contempt, it's not disdain, it's not rejection. What they need is someone who'll reach out to them, someone who'll show them a bit of compassion, a bit of generosity, a bit of what I've called large-heartedness. You know, can we be people who've got big hearts, or are we going to be people who've got tiny little shriveled up hearts that never think about anybody except ourselves? I think that's the challenge that this story of the prodigal son puts before us. And I think every single one of us could probably say what's there on the screen because all of us have bad moments at times. When we feel bad about ourselves for whatever reason, it really helps if another person does something that tells us that no matter what's happened, we're still okay, we're still worthwhile. And you can be pretty sure that the next time you pass someone in the streets who's a bit down on their luck or obviously homeless or whatever, they're not feeling great about themselves. And if you could help them feel better about themselves, then we're being good disciples of Jesus. So that's the first story that I wanted to share with you. Remember, to help us understand what mercy looks like, what being a Christian looks like in action. The second story, I think, is another one that many of you will be familiar with, and it's the story of the Good Samaritan. The story of the Good Samaritan is about a fellow who's travelling from one place to another and he gets mugged, basically. So he's beaten up, all his money and possessions are robbed, and he's left for dead. And in the story, the first person to come along is a priest. And the priest just ignores him and walks past pretending he hasn't even seen him. And the next person to come along is a Levite. These are Jewish religious figures, priests and Levites. The second person is a Levite, and he does the same thing. So they see this guy lying there bleeding, obviously having just been beaten up and robbed, and they just walk past. And then the third person to come down the road is a Samaritan. Now, you won't go into all the details, but Samaritans and Jews were kind of two rival nationalities who didn't get on together very well. So when Jesus, who's a Jew, tells a story about two Jewish people who did the wrong thing, and then about a Samaritan person who did the right thing, that's a pretty confronting story for the people to whom he's talking. And in the story, this Samaritan, he stops, he bandages up the fellow's wounds, he lifts him up, puts him on his horse or donkey or whatever he's got, takes him off to the nearest village, takes him to the nearest, we would say perhaps motel, nearest inn, pays for him to be looked after there, and says, look, on my way back, I'll call in, and if I haven't left enough money, I'll make up what's missing. The question for us to ask ourselves is, what does mercy look like? And I think it's pretty obvious that the priest and the Levite didn't have much of a shred of mercy in their hearts. But this Samaritan did. And the gospel, the way Jesus tells the story, he makes the point. And I think he's trying to drive the point home about the priest and the Levite too. For the Samaritan, his heart was moved with pity. The question that we could ask ourselves, I think is a really important question, who is the Good Samaritan today? And the Good Samaritan today is a person who comes across somebody else in some kind of trouble or in need of a helping hand and who does something practical about it. Really, it's as simple as that. The Good Samaritan today, and we could all be Good Samaritans, is the person who sees somebody who needs some help and you help. And that's really the point that Jesus is trying to make. And so the questions They can be a little bit confronting, I guess. And if we were to ask them of ourselves in terms of our own experience, they might make us a bit uncomfortable. But will we, or maybe have we in the past, crossed to the other side and pretended that we didn't notice? I don't want to get involved. It's too much trouble. I'm too busy rushing off to where I've got to go. I've only got $20 with me and I need that to get the meal that I'm looking forward to. So how could I give any of that away to this person who's lying on the side of the road? Do we just walk past and pretend we don't see? Will we come up with all kinds of excuses to justify our inaction? Well, I'm really running late. I've got to be somewhere else. I haven't got my mobile with me, so I can't ring my friends to tell them I'm running late, so I haven't got the time to stop. Do we make those sorts of excuses? Or, for example, will we let fear instead of courage be the thing that determines how we behave? Because remember, in the story, the man who's been beaten up is lying there and he's bleeding, and there's no guarantee that the people who beat him up haven't just gone into hiding behind some bushes and are ready to beat up the next person as well. It required a bit of courage for the Samaritan to stop. It wasn't just that he wanted to help, but he was prepared even to put himself a little bit at risk to help. Or will we simply be the kinds of people who see a need and then do something about it? This is all really feeding into the idea of what LifeLink Day is all about, because LifeLink Day and LifeLink itself is about being this kind of person. And if we're not necessarily going to do something because we're not going to encounter these people, we can at least make sure that we equip others to help them if we can't help them ourselves. But for this to happen, whether it's me helping the person myself or me raising some money to make sure other people have got the resources to help, that won't happen unless this happens. We have to have eyes that are ready to see. We have to have eyes that won't just turn away because it makes us feel uncomfortable. We've got to have ears that are tuned in to listen. And sometimes people ask for help in all sorts of subtle ways. And you've really got to be tuned into them to pick up that although they're not saying it, out loud, they're actually looking for something. And most of all, you've got to have a heart that wants to help. You've got to have the heart of that Good Samaritan whose heart was moved with pity. I'm going to stop there because we're running a bit late and I've realised there's still a fair bit to go. So I think that's enough to get the point across that I wanted to make. What I want to do now is invite you just for a moment to watch this short DVD, which will introduce us to LifeLink, and then we'll move fairly quickly through the other parts of the material. Welcome everybody. LifeLink was established by the Archdiocese of Perth in 1994 as the unifying name under which the many welfare and social service agencies established or supported by the Church would be funded and promoted. A number of our agencies have served people in need within communities throughout Western Australia for more than 30 years and are well known. Organisations such as Centrecare, Identity WA and Centrecare Employment and Training. The Shopfront, Day Dawn and Emmaus community organisations were established more recently to meet emerging needs identified within the community. Each agency or service, funded or supported through LifeLink, represents an essential part of the Church's mission to reach out to those in need and in doing so, express faith in a direct and tangible manner. As you all know, as Catholics, we believe that it is through service to others that we see and experience the true face of Jesus. Pope Francis expressed this when he said, "It is not only in what we believe and what we say, but in what we do, that we come to fully know and understand the message of love which Jesus brought to the world." Just as Jesus walked with and reached out to the poor, the lonely, the isolated and the abused, we too are called upon to give concrete expression to our faith through our active service to others. Through the wonderful work of our LifeLink agencies, we bear witness to and are a vital part of engaging with people who reach out to us for help. I hope you enjoy this informational video.
LifeLink is not a welfare organisation. It is the fundraising and promotional arm for the many welfare agencies and services established by the Archdiocese of Perth. LifeLink currently provides funding support to the following agencies and organisations established or supported by the Church: Catholic Ministry for people who are deaf or hearing impaired, Catholic Outreach, Centre Care Employment and Training, Centre Care Incorporated, Juraminda, Day Dawn Advocacy Centre, Emmanuel Centre, Emmaus Community, Identity WA, Samaritan Projects, The Shopfront.
Whilst it may not always be obvious, there are thousands of people who desperately need our help right here in Perth and throughout WA.
LifeLink Catholic Caring Agencies reach out to more than 34,000 Western Australian families and individuals in need each year. By providing services and respite care to individuals, families and children with physical or intellectual disability. By offering safe refuge and assistance for women and children escaping domestic abuse or violence. Providing emergency housing, skills training for the unemployed, food and support for the homeless, and caring homes for people battling mental health conditions.
LifeLink impacts positively in the lives of ordinary Western Australians each and every day. I'd like to share with you now the work of just 3 of our agencies. They are examples of what can and is being achieved as a direct result of your generosity.
The Shopfront started in 2001. I went to see Archbishop Hickey about the problem we had with all the homeless people and looking for help. And so he told me, why don't you go and start a Shopfront? So the Shopfront first is a drop-in centre, and they get lovely volunteers who are warm and welcoming to greet them. But it's also a referral. So also then if you're homeless or you're looking for assistance, the Shopfront networks with a wide group of people so that they can provide emergency assistance for people who are in need. Last year, 25,000 people came through Shopfront. People can help by donating to Shopfront financially. Other people may say, look, we'd like to help with blankets or canned drives. So people can help in many ways, and all of it is really, really appreciated. Most recently of someone, a lady that we were able to help who needed some assistance for Christmas presents, and just seeing that family and the joy and the love that they experienced by receiving the gifts of Christmas presents. And then her children were so excited when I went to see them. Oh, she's come with gifts. And they asked me, please eat with us, please share with us. Thank you for the love you've shown us. And that to me is repeated again and again to all these people who come to receive a touch of love. I think it's really important to recognise the amazing work that all our parishes do to support Shopfront. Most of our volunteers come directly from the parishes. They give up their time to come and support those who are in need. And without the parishes and the support from our parishes, Shopfront would not be the warm, welcoming and caring place it is.
Centre Care Employment and Training was established in 1976. We seek to assist the most disadvantaged people in our community. We work with a lot of migrants, with a lot of culturally and linguistically diverse people. We work with youth at risk, and we work with people with disabilities. Centre Care delivers 2 different types of programs. The first one is the Skills for Education and Employment program. This program delivers services to the culturally and linguistic diverse community. And the other side of the organisation is vocational education training, which looks at industry-specific courses. Centacare assists between 1,000 and 1,500 students per year. Of those students, 1,200 people would do the Skills for Education and Training program, and the other 300 or so do the VET programs, which is the Vocational Education and Training programs. Recent changes in government funding have increased student fees. So for the first time ever, we've actually had to turn students away because they can't afford the fees. Donating through LifeLink will assist these students to help pay their fees and allow them to continue on and do the training that they've come to us for. Centacare is a warm and inclusive environment. We've recently developed a volunteer program where students who've done a course with us have come back and volunteered. It's quite a structured program. They get training, and it allows them to go back into the classroom and to assist the people that they were once in that same classroom. And when they come back into the classroom, they can share their experiences and help these people achieve what they have achieved in the community.
Emmaus started in 1996 when I was working in a crisis unit. People were coming into the crisis unit and were coming back to the crisis unit constantly. I prayed and asked the Lord to give us a property where we could have long-term independent community living. The benefits of community living are that people in the long term become family. Our mission statement is that every person created by God deserves to love and be loved, to be respected and to be taken seriously. This is what we strive for, especially with people who live with mental health issues. Our basis is the Jesus message. It's simple, yet radical. It's about love. If our community grows, it will be in love. It's not for profit, it's for the love of our brothers and sisters. If Emmaus didn't exist, I guess the people would be living in hostels. The difference between a hostel and Emmaus is a hostel is accommodation. We're here, it's a home, and that's what we're striving for anyway. If I had a message regarding how people should treat people with mental health issues, it's the same as treating someone with diabetes or cancer. So the message would be that we are all connected, we are all brothers and sisters, and love. Love is the message. I can't even tell you how strongly I feel and this community feels about this message. People can support us by supporting LifeLink because we're part of a web of agencies that help our brothers and sisters. And if people feel in their heart, how can I do this? And I want to do something here, support LifeLink because it does go straight to the source, believe me. And it has helped in so many ways here. And other agencies. I'm friends with other agencies and it helps many people.
Each year, LifeLink supported agencies deliver more than $50 million of professional programs, caring services, qualified personnel and resources for the benefit of the Western Australian community.
Thankfully, much of this funding is provided through various state and federal government grants and service contracts. However, to ensure our agencies are appropriately funded, the Church through LifeLink provides more than $1.2 million in direct funding each and every year. In addition to the substantial assistance the Church already provides with buildings and properties utilised by these welfare agencies. LifeLink's mission, its purpose, is to raise this required $1.2 million through my annual fundraising appeals and with the enthusiastic support of Catholic schools in this Archdiocese on LifeLink Day.
More information about LifeLink, photos, articles and teaching resources are now available on our new website. Please visit us at www.lifelink.com.au.
Thank you for taking the time to learn more about LifeLink and the work of our social service agencies. It's up to all of us to help make a difference. Let us reach out with generosity, with compassion, and with love when someone asks us for help. I think that video gives us all a good sense of the breadth of coverage of LifeLink and the wide variety of people that we're able to assist through the work of LifeLink. I just want to say a few words about the core objectives of this day, the reason why we've gathered here today and why we do this once every year. When this initiative was first introduced back in 1999, there were really four things that we were trying to achieve. And the first was to promote understanding of the Church's response to people in need within our community. The second is to instill in Catholic students attending our archdiocesan schools, so that's you and all of your school friends, to instill in you a sense of responsibility for those less fortunate. And perhaps it would be better for me to say to deepen that sense of responsibility, because I am well aware that it already exists. Then thirdly, to provide education and information for the work undertaken by our LifeLink social service agencies in helping, as we've just seen in the DVD, many thousands of West Australian families and individuals each year. And lastly, to encourage a practical demonstration of our faith. It's all very well to talk about our faith, but as Pope Francis reminded us, we actually have to do something. So to demonstrate a practical expression of our faith by asking students, teachers and schools to organise some special fundraising events for LifeLink Day, with the proceeds really going to people in need within our community. So I'm very grateful, because in talking about these things, I'm talking about something that's already happening around the Archdiocese, and what I really want to do today is to encourage all of you to sort of become ambassadors, to take this message back to your schools so that this good work can continue. So far, more than $1.2 million has been raised over the years through all sorts of fundraising events and activities. And again, I want you to know how grateful, not just I am, but particularly all those people who've been helped. And so now we're here about LifeLink Day in 2015. When you came here this morning, and I can see them on your tables, the school would have been, or your school would have been provided with a special LifeLink Day folder and a whole pile of posters, which I presume are in those little cardboard pyramids. And schools who aren't able to be here today will receive these delivered to the school shortly. What these will do is provide you and your teachers with valuable resources to share. And I hope that these posters will end up prominently displayed somewhere in the school in advance of LifeLink Day, which this year is the 3rd of June 2015. We're launching it here this morning, but as I said at the start, this is being videoed, and the official launch is the 3rd of June in 2015, although for a variety of reasons your school may need to choose another day. In these kits, a number of things have been provided. First of all, contact and information sheets for our LifeLink agencies. A few examples of the work of our LifeLink agencies. And then on a USB, included with your kit, are included a copy of the video that we've just looked at, copies of the LifeLink and LifeLink Day logos, photos of our LifeLink agencies at work, and a special video presentation from Emmaus Community, which was the last of the 3 agencies that you've just looked at. During this launch, one of the things that always happens, it's one of the traditions, is that I announce which school or schools will be the recipient of the Archbishop's Spirit Award for last year, 2014. It is important for me to remind you that the Spirit Award is not given primarily to the school that raises the most money. Obviously, we want to raise as much money as we can, but these are called Spirit Awards. It's about the enthusiasm and the commitment and the energy and the initiative that individual schools bring to the challenge of raising money for LifeLink. So it's presented to the school, which demonstrates in a really strong way active support for this LifeLink Day initiative. It's presented to the school, which embraces the goals of LifeLink. That is, not only to learn about the church's response to people in need, but also to undertake some form of fundraising in support of our agencies. It goes to the school which commits to educating students on their responsibility, that invitation that I was talking about earlier, to care for those who are in need. And it goes to the school which promotes this ethos of caring and compassion to everybody in the school community, that all of us together have a responsibility to show love and compassion, not just on LifeLink Day, of course, but on every day. Up on the screen, I'm not going to read them all out, but you'll see the list of schools which have received the Archbishop Spirit Award in the past, the first one in 1999, and the last one, of course, which was won by two schools last year, that is, Irene McCormack College and Prendeville College in Ocean Reef. There's a sense in which every school is deserving of an award, because every school in the Archdiocese, in one way or another, seems to me to have got behind this LifeLink Day as best they can. But Bishop Don and I sit down and we talk about the information that we've been given about the various schools, and it allows us to just acknowledge in a special way a school, or maybe a couple of schools, which have made an extra effort. And it's always a challenge. We always get some good advice. But in the end, Bishop Don and I did make a decision, and in a moment I'm going to announce that decision. But before I do, I want to make mention of a couple of schools who, although they didn't get the LifeLink Spirit Award, have nevertheless really been quite outstanding. So this is kind of a sweet and sour thing at the same time, because if your school gets a special mention, that's a great thing, but it means you probably didn't get the award. So don't get too disappointed, just be proud that you got a special mention. So the four schools that got a special mention for their efforts in 2014 were St Gerard's Primary School, St Pius X Primary School, Catholic School, La Salle College and Holy Cross College. So congratulations to those schools for the special efforts that they put in. So having announced those special mentions, I now want to announce that this year Bishop Don and I couldn't separate two schools, and so we're awarding the Archbishop Spirit Award to two schools. One's a primary school and one's a secondary school. So the special award for the primary school goes to Our Lady's Assumption School in Dianella. The secondary school winner of the Archbishop Spirit Award for 2014 is Trinity College in East Perth. Bishop Don and I will be visiting both of those schools later in the year to present these awards, and I know that both the Bishop and I are looking forward to that. As I've mentioned, LifeLink Day is scheduled for the first Wednesday in June. It coincides with WA Week, so the date for LifeLink Day this year is the 3rd of June, Wednesday the 3rd of June. But if for some reason your school isn't able to launch it on that particular day, then you'll be able to choose another day, whatever suits your program best. I do want to ask you, and I know that Bishop Don joins me in this, I do want to ask you to take the opportunity to learn as much as you can about how our church does in fact respond to those people who are in need. Particularly discover, if you can, a little bit more about some of these extraordinary agencies that we as the Catholic Church here in Perth support. Last year, schools raised collectively more than $90,000 for LifeLink Day. That's an extraordinary contribution on the part of our school system. And I'm very grateful to you and want to congratulate you for that. But because that was such a fantastic effort, we're going to be just a little bit bold and see whether we can crack the $100,000 for 2015. So that's the challenge, that's the goal, that together, all of us playing our part, we might be able to raise $100,000 for people in need in our community this year. So with that, and with that challenge put there before you, I simply need now to officially launch LifeLink Day for 2015 and assure you of the blessing and the support and the prayers of both Bishop Don and myself as you undertake this important, really important initiative for our church here in our Archdiocese. Thanks everybody. I'm sure you're all hanging out for morning tea, so I think someone will probably come up and tell us what we're doing next. Thanks very much.